So while the world watches 3 million pages of Epstein files link the president to the most depraved network in history, Mark Carney is quietly rewriting the map of Canada.
And while Trump is busy sharing racist memes, starving out Cuba, and starting wars in 7 different countries, Carney is launching his own war, a shadow war. One leader is tearing down 80 years of global peace, the other is building a fortress.
Yeah, while the US descends into chaos, Carney's executing trade pivots to China, South Korea, and the Middle East to make sure that we never need to rely on the US alone. His shadow war isn't being fought with tanks, it's being fought with contracts and consulates. If you look at your phone today, you'll see 3 stories that look like random headlines, but they're actually the front lines of Carney's plan.
We're talking about a massive new deal with China on canola and electric cars, a total gutting and rebuilding of our auto industry strategy, and Canada literally planting a flag and nuke Greenland to block Trump's path.
Taken separately, well, they're just news clips. But put together, that's a sovereignty shield. A Canada refusing to be a victim who is systematically playing the global game to win against a White House in total meltdown. So this morning, we're breaking down exactly what Carney has done over the last few months to Trump-proof this country. And we have to ask, is this Canada finally getting stronger, or is the architect taking on more risks than we can handle?
Let's start with the main character of this phase of the story, Mark Carney, former managing director at Goldman Sachs, former head of the Bank of Canada, former head of the Bank of England, and now Canada's 24th Prime Minister who is surging in the polls.
His whole pitch when he ran for the Liberal leader was basically this: Canada needs to toughen up and grow up economically without losing its soul. Unite the country, defend sovereignty, and build the strongest economy in the G7.
Because look at the reality of our backdrop. Donald Trump has already imposed tariffs on every Canadian product crossing the border. He's explicitly threatened us with 100% tariffs if we don't kill our China trade deals, and he's openly now calling Mark Carney a governor, as if Canada is already a branch of the United States.
He is tearing up the global rulebook in real time. And Canada isn't just in the blast radius. We're being told to choose between our independence or our economy.
And Carney's response has been a masterclass in defiance. He's telling the world that the American bargain is broken. He's warning other middle powers that if you aren't at the table, you're on the menu.
This is where the shadow war all begins. Carney isn't waiting for Trump to calm down, luckily. He's building his own table, signing partnerships from Seoul to Doha, and ensuring that by the time Washington looks up from its own wreckage, Canada is already too connected to be crushed.
Which brings us to the first big move, that China deal.
A quick rewind here. Under Trudeau, Canada hit Chinese electric vehicles with a 100% tariff following the lead of the USA. But Beijing hit back by slamming Canadian canola and related products with massive duties. We're talking canola seed facing effective tariffs of around the mid-80% range and canola meal at 100%. Farmers on the prairies were feeling that every single day.
China is roughly a $4 billion market for Canada canola seed alone. When that door almost shuts, it hits farm incomes, it hits rural communities, and it hits foreign exchange earnings.
So, in January, Carney announces a preliminary agreement with China. We ease off on some of the pressure on the Chinese EVs, and in return, China slashes those punishing tariffs on our farm and food exports. Ottawa expects canola seed tariffs to drop down to about 15% by March 1st, from roughly 85%. The 100% duties on canola meal, well, they're suspended, at least until the end of the year. Same idea for things like lobster, crabs, and peas.
For farmers, that's not a small adjustment. That is going from, this market is basically wrecked, to, we can seriously ship again.
But there's always a trade-off, right? Now, to get that relief on canola, Canada is giving some ground to those 100% EV tariffs. The deal lets in a quota of Chinese electric vehicles at a much lower rate, just over 6%. With conditions on price and volumes over time. That's meant to make EVs cheaper for Canadians and to avoid a full-blown trade war.
From the outside, you'd think Canadians would be split on this, but look at the surge. That trade deal has a 77% approval rating, and that is just unheard of in this polarized climate. Mark Carney's Liberals has surged to a 15-point lead over Pierre Poilievre's Conservatives in the latest polls.
This is the Carney surge. Nearly 3/4 of the country watched his Davos speech where he told Trump that the American bargain is over. And for the first time in years, the Liberals have flipped the under 35 votes.
National pride is at an all-time high because Canadians see that a leader who isn't just talking, he's building a sovereignty shield.
And that brings us to the second layer of the sovereignty shield, the auto defense strategy. Now, last week, Carney was in Vaughan, Ontario, launching what he calls a new strategy to transform Canada's auto industry. The timing? It's surgical. You don't change the EV tariff deal with China without also showing workers and companies what the plan is back here at home.
The pitch is simple but ambitious. Canada has the minerals, the skilled workers, the clean electricity, and this long history of building cars. The government wants to turn that into serious EV production right here. So Carney is now putting $3 billion on the table from the Strategic Response Fund to help our factories adapt and diversify. We aren't just assembling other people's tech anymore, we're upgrading our own plants to build the future right here.
And to make sure that those cars actually have a place to drive, well, he's earmarking $1.5 billion through the Canada Infrastructure Bank to build a massive national EV charging and hydrogen refueling network. He's building the pipes of a new economy so that we aren't dependent on anyone else's infrastructure.
And here's the smart fight in action. While Trump is sharing social media posts raging about everyone from immigrants to the media, Carney is signing a memorandum of understanding with South Korea that covers way more than just cars. We're talking about a massive $100 billion defense and auto linkage.
This is incredible. South Korea's Hanwha Ocean is bidding to build Canada's 12 next-generation submarines. But Carney isn't just buying them, he's leveraging the deal. He's already secured a $345 million investment to build a brand new structural steel beam mill at Algoma Steel in Sault Ste. Marie.
Think about that. We're going to use Canadian steel to build the subs that patrol our Arctic. And it doesn't stop there. The South Korean partnership includes a future mobility forum that will bring Hyundai and LG even deeper into Ontario's EV supply chain.
So to make it stick, Carney is also putting $2.3 billion on the table for Canadians in consumer rebates. But here's the real fortress part. So if you buy an EV under $50,000 made by an ally like South Korea, you get the rebate. And if it's made in Canada, there is no price cap. So basically, Carney is incentivizing Canadians to buy the shield.
So while imports from China get a pathway in under the new tariff structure, the government is trying to put Canadian-made and Allied-made EVs within reach too. When you pair that with the China Canola deal, you start to see the pattern. On one hand, Canada gets its farm exports out of the penalty box. On the other, we say, if we're going to face more competition from cheap Chinese EVs, well, we'll answer it by building a bigger, more competitive industry here and selling into as many markets as possible, not just the United States.
And that last part is really crucial. Our auto sector has been built around American demand for decades. Overwhelmingly, the cars that we make end up south of the border. Carney is telling the world now, we'll keep our relationship with the US, but we're not betting the whole country on a neighbor that's in total meltdown. This is what strategic autonomy looks like.
Now, that's China and the cars. Let's take a look a little farther south to Southeast Asia, because another pillar of this plan is Indonesia and ASEAN.
Yep. Last autumn, Carney's government signed Canada's first ever bilateral trade agreement with an ASEAN country, Indonesia. That's a comprehensive economic partnership agreement covering goods, services, investment, the whole package. It slashes tariffs on 95% of our exports and was signed in record time, less than 4 years. That tells you both sides don't trust what's happening in Washington.
Indonesia is the fourth most populous country on Earth, and it's a fast-growing economy with a huge market. The goal is massive. Carney wants to double Canadian exports to non-US markets at a $300 billion in trade over the next decade. He's already pushing to finish a full Canada-ASEAN deal this year. They're consulting on new deals like the UAE, Mercosur, countries in South America, and let's not forget his upcoming trip to India.
Yep, that one's going to be important. At the ASEAN summit last fall, he made a point of saying Canada respects trade rules. He's basically stepping into the old US role, positioning Canada as the steady partner in a region that doesn't want to be trapped between the US and China.
So if you connect the dots, Indonesia, the wider ASEAN talks, the China deal, the auto strategy, all of it is part of one story. Canada wants to be in more rooms with more options, so when any one big partner throws its weight around, we're not isolated.
Which brings us to maybe the most symbolic move of all of this week, the Arctic, specifically Nuuk, Greenland. Now, yesterday we talked about Canada raising its flag over a brand new consulate in Nuuk. Now, that might sound like a small diplomatic ceremony, but in the context of Trump openly talking about control over Greenland again, it's a very, very clear message.
The message is Canada stands with Greenland and Denmark on Arctic sovereignty, on self-determination, and on treating the Arctic as a region where the local people and the existing states set the terms, not whoever shouts the loudest on TV. It also ties into a wider Canadian Arctic strategy announced in December. More consulates, including in Anchorage, more military investment, and more presence up north.
And again, there's a massive trade angle hiding inside that consulate opening. As Arctic shipping routes open up, whoever has serious diplomatic and security presence there gets a say in who benefits economically.
This isn't just theory either. Last summer, Canada scored a major resource victory when Greenland Resources Inc., a Canadian firm, secured a 30-year exploitation licensing deal for the Unveiled project. We aren't just mining rocks, we're securing the future of a global defense.
And this is the part that likely has Trump fuming. This single Canadian project is set to supply 25% of all molybdenum to the European Union and nearly 100% of their defense-related needs. Molybdenum is the secret sauce for high-performance steel used in tanks, ships, and jets.
Think about the leverage that gives us. While the U.S. talks about annexing Greenland, Canada is already on the ground extracting the minerals that power the European military-industrial complex. We're not just an observer on the sidelines, we're the critical supplier for our most important allies.
And this is why opening that consulate in Nuuk was so vital. You don't just sign a 30-year mineral contract and then walk away. You plant a flag, you build a presence, and you show the world and the White House that Canada is a permanent player in the Arctic's economic future.
This Greenland move isn't an isolated event either. Since Mark Carney became PM, he has fundamentally realigned Canada with the European Union, in a move that probably has Trump's advisors screaming at the clouds again. Canada has officially joined the European Defense SAFE program.
Now, we are the only non-European country in this club. So Carney is effectively diversifying our military and economic security away from the White House. And it fits perfectly into Carney's push for an alliance of the middle powers who support each other when those big players start ignoring the rules.
Now, if we stopped here, it would sound like Carney is just collecting foreign policy trophies. But that's not the whole story, everyone. While the architect is getting standing ovations in Brussels and Davos for outmaneuvering Trump, millions of Canadians are staring at their grocery bills and wondering, when does the shield start working for me?
So here's the reality of the shadow war at home. Grocery prices have jumped 22% in 3 years, and it feels like every time Trump threatens a new tariff, the price of coffee and meat, they spike right up again.
Families have been told inflation is cooling, but when you're at the checkout, it feels like a targeted hit on your wallet. But here's where the smart fight comes into effect. Carney isn't just watching the prices rise, he's systematically building a domestic floor to catch all of us.
That's right. Actually, just last week, Carney launched the Canada Groceries and Essentials benefit. This isn't just a tax credit. It's a $12.4 billion injection of relief. We're talking about up to $1,890 for a family of 4 to bridge the gap while Carney fixes the structural mess that he inherited.
He's also putting $500 million into a strategic response fund to help our food supply chains absorb that cost so they don't get passed on to you. He's essentially subsidizing our resilience while he builds those new trade routes to Asia and the Middle East to bypass the U.S. price spikes.
So, you see the two sides of the same coin, right? Abroad, Carney is the trade general opening consulates and signing submarine deals. But at home, he's the architect repairing a foundation that was left to rot for decades. He's removing interprovincial trade barriers and fast-tracking $1 trillion in energy and AI to ensure that Canada can finally fuel itself and feed itself.
The positive reading? The Carney surge is real because Canadians see the plan. 77% approval for the trade deals and 15-point lead in the polls. It shows that people realize the clock is ticking and they want the guy with the blueprint in charge.
10 years from now, if this project holds, Canada is less dependent on the US, plugged into the fastest growing markets in Asia, and a dominant power in the Arctic.
So that's the question that we really want to leave you with. When you look at the China tariff deal, the Indonesian agreement, the push for an ASEAN pact, do you see a Canada that's finally starting to defend itself economically?
Let us know in the comments. If you were in that chair, would you have taken the Canola deal with China? Or would you double down on the golden office with Trump and hope that things calm down?
So if you've got value from this breakdown, hit that subscribe button and join us. We're tracking every move Carney makes as he builds this sovereignty shield.
We're also deep diving into these files over on our Substack. So if you want the raw data on the South Korea MOU and the Greenland mineral contracts, join our community there. It's where we go beyond the headlines and give you the tactical advantage.
And let's continue the conversation in our private Facebook group for daily updates and chats. All of the links are below in the description.
Thanks for spending your Sunday morning with us, everybody. Stay sharp, stay informed, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Ciao for now.
Bye-bye.